One of the top stories we are tracking this morning is the price of wheat. It surged by the most in a decade yesterday, at one point leaping 9%, with Moscow threatening ships sailing to Ukrainian ports. Now, that's happening after Russia withdrew from the Black Sea grain deal earlier this week. Joining us for more is our Bloomberg reporter out of Sydney, Keira Wright. Keira, thank you so much for joining this morning. So what are the details? What do we know right now about Russia's threat to cargo ships?
So we know that Russia has basically resumed blocking ships that are carrying food into Ukrainian ports at this point, and this comes after it recently launched an attack on some of Ukraine's key ports. The Russian Defense Ministry had actually issued a warning saying that it was going to consider any vessels coming into these ports to potentially be carrying military cargo, and that comes into effect as of today, so Thursday. Now, Ukrainian officials say that Russia potentially is just targeting their ability to export grain, accusing them of using food as leverage in this war. Meanwhile, the US says that this is just a tactic, basically a move by Russia to justify any attacks on civilian ships in the Black Sea and then blame them on Ukraine.
And Keira, you know, the timing of this, over here where I am in London, we were just celebrating inflation coming down, food prices going down, and then we're looking at what you're talking about, those surge in prices. So when we look on a global scale, what sort of impact is this surge in wheat prices having?
Yeah, look, I think it's a question that a lot of traders probably have in mind at this point, as well as consumers. And I think it's probably too premature at this point to say that we definitely will kind of see an impact on food inflation and, you know, see it start raging again. What we do know is that a lot of products made out of wheat, so, you know, your cereal, your flours, they have kind of continued to climb in the past, even as crop export prices were lower than what we're seeing right now. So it certainly could see this kind of threaten food costs for food manufacturers again, but it's just too early to say at this point.
What about the collapse of the Black Sea grain deal? What does that mean in the long term, Keira?
So, I mean, the move, it obviously jeopardizes a very key trade route for Ukraine, which is one of the world's largest exporters of grain and also seed oils. So I guess that the grain deal, the collapse thereof, it could likely push Ukrainian grain out from those kind of key ports into some of its river ports, as well as rail and road transit across the EU border. Now, obviously, this is going to be a big challenge in terms of cost, because the longer that the grain needs to be hauled, the more expensive it becomes for these exporters.